Okay, so hello everyone. What I wanted to look at tonight is just something again, just a little bit different stuff that comes up and questions that are asked. And so somebody asked me, is it okay to use a flavored grape juice for Kiddish? A flavored grape juice. So then I thought, well, you know what, we might as well have a look and just go into a little bit about Kiddish itself, and just to get a bit of clarity around certain things. So I'm going to share my screen, and we can go straight into just and it's going to be comprehensive. It's going to be, then I've put together this the source sheet. There's a lot of different sources on Kiddish, and it's kind of more like a discussion as well as a share all in one. And I'm hoping that as of next year, we are going to actually be able to go live. I'd like to start doing live in the base Midrash, if that's possible. But we'll still Zoom it for those who are in Durban and elsewhere. Okay, Gaynor, that's for you. Okay. So let's get going. So if we look at the sources, so we really get like the understanding of Kiddush. What does Kiddush mean? Kiddush means to sanctify the day. So the Gemara says in Psachim Tanu Rabbanan, Zachor is Yom HaShabbos l'Kadshoy, that the Gemara says that you should Zachor at Yom HaShabbos, remember Shabbos l'Kadsho, to sanctify it. And how does that work? It says the Gemara, Zochrehu al yain, remember it on wine. And on that, the Tosfos picks up and says, what does that mean? Why does it have to be on wine? So he says, because the Zechira Ksiv ala yayin, that because when it speaks about Zechira, this concept of remembering or mentioning, okay, so that speaks about wine, and he quotes from this pasuk from Hosea, that the Zechira is on wine, and when it speaks about the Zechira of Shabbos, it says, V'hai Zechira hani Kiddush. The Zechira that we actually speak about is Kiddush itself. It says it's not Vayachulu. Why? The Vayachulu lo matzinu ala kos ela betfila. It's an amazing thing that Vayachulu, the concept of Vayachulu, according to the way Tosfos is understanding, is not, when we think about Kiddush, we start Vayachul Hashemayim va'aretz, Vayerev va'yivokev Vayachul Hashemayim va'aretz. We start our Kiddush on the with Vayachul, and we think that that's the ikra of Kiddush. But in actual fact, that's not the ikra of Kiddush. Because as Tosfos says that Vayachulu really is tefillah. It's part of our davening. And that's why the Gemara says in Shabbos, and the reason why we have Vayachulu and Kiddush on the kos, on an actual cup, is because of what? Is because of your children and your household. You might not have become too sure, they may not have davened, and since they may not have davened, so therefore then they need to hear the Kiddush, and so therefore we say it. But then he says, by the way, now we've got a strange thing in this Vayachulu. Vayachulu comes in davening, in the tefillah, and Vayachulu comes in Kiddush, because the Kiddush is there to fulfill the obligation of those who require the Kiddush. But he says an amazing thing, because why do we say this Vayachulu after davening? We always say it, and everybody knows that we say it, but why do we say it? Why is it such an important thing for us to say that we stand up when we say it? And it's quite a pomp and ceremony. We sing it, Vayachul Hashemayim va'aretz. Why do we do that together? So look what he says, Vayachulu achar tefillah b'kol ram. Why do we say Vayachulu in a loud voice after davening? Hainu, this is because Mishum Yontov Shechal Liyos b'Shabbos. The reason why we say it is because of when Yontov falls on Shabbos. When Yontov falls on Shabbos, if you remember, mitpalelin ata b'chartanu va'enu mevayachulu. What do? We say ata b'chartanu. We say the bracha of. We say that our davening goes immediately into the Yontov davening. Since it goes immediately into the Yontov davening, we don't say vayachulu betfila in the davening. V'tiknu nami lomar b'kol haShabbos u'shel lechalek ben Shabbos to Shabbos. And so therefore, because we have it in order to say it on Yontov, which falls out on Shabbos. So then we said, the Chazal is the way Tosfos understands it. The Chazal said we say Vayachulu every Shabbos, so that we don't make a difference we don't separate between different Shabbosim. But that's why Vayachulu after davening is not like the biggest thing in the whole world. It's we say it and we make it into our part of our every Shabbos. it's clear from the Tosfos that the reason is because of a practical reason to be able to mention via chulu, which we should say in davening as part of the inverted commas Kiddish, the sanctification of Shabbos, but we don't do that on Yom Tov, and therefore we still have to do it, and therefore we do it after Yom Tov. Okay. So once you've said that, we can understand where that comes from. And now Tosfos is going to move over, and now he says, "V'nire, the Kiddish ala yayin asmachti." So the reality is that saying Kiddish on wine is not like the be all and end all, and we're going to see what that means. How he says that the wine is just like a thing that Chazal wanted to use. And they because they just wanted to use it, therefore it becomes the big thing. It says but because wine is not necessarily saying the Kiddush on wine may be the important thing, but the drinking of the wine may not be the important thing, and that's what Tosfos says. It's only a rabbinic thing that we have to drink. In other words, Chazal said, let's make Kiddush on wine and then drink the wine. But it's not clear that it's such a massive, huge obligation to drink the wine. Okay, that's important for us to understand because, well, somebody's got to drink the wine. Someone has to because you made a Grape agafen. Since you made the Grape agafen, it's a birkas nenin, it's a bracha of enjoyment of something at Hashem's world. Someone's got to drink it, but it doesn't have to be the person who actually made the Kiddush. It could be somebody else. Where do we see that? We see that on a normal Friday night. In the old days, there was a world called, before COVID, where they used to make Kiddish in shul. I don't know if any shul does it anymore, which is quite sad, because it was always such a lovely time for the kids to come together and everything. But the person who makes the Kiddish doesn't drink because he's not really fulfilling the obligation of Kiddish for himself, but he gives it to a child to drink, and it's still okay, and it's not a bracha levat Torah. So that's important to understand. Okay, now who's obligated in this Kiddish? Who are the ones that need to hear Kiddush or be Makadesh? So says the Shulchan Aruch, Nashim chayavot b'Kiddush. Women are obligated to say Kiddush. Av al bishu mitzvot atzeh shazman grama. It says the halacha, even though it's a positive mitzvah which is caused by time, meaning that because it's only a time-bound thing. If there wasn't Shabbos, there wouldn't be Kiddush. Therefore, Kiddush is a time-bound mitzvah. Now, why is it? Why are women also obligated? Because we know that the general rule is that in a mitzvah aseh shazman grama, a positive mitzvah bound by time, women are not obligated. So how come they're obligated in this case? And he says, because the words zachor and shamor, we know was said, but dibur echad. They were said in one word. So since Zachor and Shamar are said, B'dibur echad, in one utterance, they're connected to each other. And so therefore, in the same way as women are obligated in the negative mitzvahs of Shabbos, that they can't do certain things, so too, they're obligated in the positive mitzvahs of Ahani, Nashi, Hoil, Ve'isnu, B'shmira, Isnu, B'zachira. And now look at this. And this is great. Umotziot et ha'anashim, Ho'il v'chayavot min ha'Torah k'motam. And women can make Kiddush. And through their Kiddush, they can be moitzi men. Because why? Because both of them have an obligation, an equal obligation from the Torah that they are that they have to say Kiddush. So I don't know if I ever told you this, but I had a friend. So he got married. We were very close, and I went the first Shabbos that they're at home. I went there for Shabbos, and everything's wonderful. It's such a beautiful atmosphere, and we arrived there. It's time for Kiddush, and I see he's not holding a kos, and I can't understand why. And on the other side of the table, I had the Kiddush being said by his wife, which is a little bit strange because we're not used to that kind of thing. But according to the strict learning of the Shulchan Aruch, it's fine. Comes along the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says an interesting thing. He says, Umoitzis is anashim. Says that everybody agrees. V'chein hiskimu ataz v'amagen Avram v'hagra. Mikol makom, yesh lahachmir lechatchila shelo totzi isha anashim she'ena mibei b'deisa. Says, but we should be machmir to not allow a woman to fulfill the obligation of people who are not from her house, the zila milsa, because it's a little bit of a degradation of the Kiddush. Now that's an interesting thing. I understand where he's coming from. The Mishnah Berurah is writing in 18th century Europe. He's not right. Sorry, 19th century Europe. He's not writing in 2021. And because he's not writing in 2021, when you read the Pnei Halacha doesn't even mention this. That for certain people she can, for certain people she can't. It's quite clear according to him, that a woman can say Kiddish. Now, it's a little bit different when it comes to Havdalah, but we haven't got time for that. But understand that it can be, it's a different thing, Havdalah, but Havdalah and Kiddish are very connected because they both come from the word Zachor. Okay. Now, let's just understand quickly, when are you supposed to make Kiddish? So, it's not so much prevalent here, but in many places, what you find is that people will come home and you'll schmooze around a little bit and, like wait a bit and chill and I don't know, whatever. And then you'll say, okay, let's come to the table. But the Shulchan Aruch says, that when you come home, you should rush to eat immediately, as quick as you can. Now, there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is quite strict and very important. And says that the Shulchan Aruch says, right? Asur lit'om klum kodem sheyeh kadosh. You're not allowed to eat anything before you make Kiddush. Afilu mayim, even water, which is a big one. Right? Many of us, that's just from the Shulchan Aruch. And even if you started eating before day, then you have to it's called Pores Mapa. You cover up the meal, you make Kiddush, and then you can carry on the minute Shabbos comes in. And if they're already drinking something, they're already drinking wine, and they don't. This is if you're in the middle of a meal and it becomes Shabbos, then you wouldn't have to say the bracha on the wine again. You would just simply say the Kiddush. The Kiddush is the bracha. Shabbat Kachor. That's the thing, because that's the essence of the Kiddush. So it's very important to see that that we're not allowed to eat anything before we make Kiddush. So therefore, it's appropriate. As he says, you can't taste anything. Zehurak isud drabonan, right? That's a drabonan din that you're not allowed to eat. Why? Because when does the obligation of Kiddush fall? The minute Shabbos comes in. Even if a person doesn't accept upon themselves Shabbos, the minute there is it becomes a safek chashecha, which means it's almost dark. You're not really sure. Is it really dark? Not dark. It's really where it's sunset. What we hold, that's when it becomes Shabbos. Mamela, it's on its own. We don't need to bring Shabbos in. So why that's so important? Because we need to understand, and sometimes we don't get this. Why do a bris? When is a bris supposed to be held? A bris is supposed to be held as early as one possibly can. So one should daven early in the morning and then have the bris immediately. One shouldn't wait until the afternoon or a little bit later or anything like that. And that's why on a Shabbos, when there's a bris, you have the bris straight after Kriyas HaTorah, after the reading of the Torah, because that's the first real time that one can have it. And you don't wait till after Musaf, which is as a general rule, if you're going to be doing it in the shul. And if that's so, why? Because we try and do the mitzvahs as soon as we can do them. We don't wait to do mitzvahs, we rush to do mitzvahs. And so therefore, that's really a thing that on a Friday night, we shouldn't be waiting around and schmoozing around, whatever the case is, but rather let's get straight into it and make that Kiddush. Okay, let's look a little bit about the these halachas. Now, these are very interesting because it's going to be that we're going to see a few things that may be different from our minhagim. And we have to try and understand that. So it comes along. The Shulchan Aruch says, "Makadesh alakos malei yayin." Firstly, you've got to have a kos which is filled with wine. So I know that the halacha is that you only have to have a reviet of wine. A reviet is 86 mils, which means that if you have a big glass of wine, so then a big wine glass, you only have to fill it up 86 mils in reviet. But the Shulchan Aruch says, fill it up. Makadesh al kos malei yayin. Make the Kiddush on a cup filled with wine. Shelo yeh pagum. Sure, that's not pagum. Anybody know what pagum means?
Pagum is like yuck. It's not, you can't eat it anymore.
That's a great description. So really, it does. Pagum means it's got like a blemish in it. There's something wrong with it. So when it comes to wine, it's not as extreme as that. That's really what it means. But when it comes to the wine and Kiddush, what it means, let's say you took a sip of the wine. You're still going to drink that wine. However, the fact that you took the sip changes it from being pure, let's call it, to being pagum. And so therefore what it needs to be is you need to have, that's why it says, make it a kos malay, have it on a full cup, because then you know, shelo yeh pagum, because then there's no pagima in it, there's no issue in that as well. And then he says, it speaks about Kiddish, it says, and v'omer vayachulu mu'umad, standing. You say vayachulu standing, v'achar kach boi brei pri hagafen v'achar chen Kiddish. And then you say brei pri hagafen, and then you say Kiddish. So that's the Shulchan Aruch. That is the main.
Can I pour it?
Sorry, say again.
Oh, interesting. Not allowed to eat anything before Kiddush. And I've been having a cup of tea.
Oi.
Oh.
I'm just going to mute everyone, if you don't mind. Okay, here we go. So what we've got is that we've got, according to Shulchan Aruch, that's Rav Yosef Karo, this says very clearly that you say v'ayachulu mu'umad, you say v'ayachulu standing, and then you say brei pri hagafen, and then you say Kiddush. Comes the Ramah, and look what the Ramah says. V'yachol la'amod b'sha'as haKiddush. You can stand up during Kiddush, no problem. But v'yosef tov, but it's better leishav, to sit. Why do you think it's better leishav? Why do you? I'm throwing it out. Why do you think it's better that we should sit during Kiddush rather than stand? I'm not saying you should do it or you shouldn't do it. I'm saying where is the coming from? The Shulchan Aruch coming from that you should rather sit than stand during Kiddush. Now, what Kiddush means? Kiddush is the brocha, right? It's not vayachulu. It's Kiddush. Kiddush is the brocha. The brocha of Kirishan v'ratzavan. That's the brocha. Anybody want to answer? If you don't, that's fine, and I'll speak it through. But I'd love to hear from someone. Would anybody like to venture an answer? Come on, Lionel. I can see that you want to. Okay, Alon.
Maybe covered.
Covered for what? It's a good idea. Covered for who or for what?
Covered over the wine.
Okay. So why is sitting covered for the wine rather than standing covered for the wine?
It got something to do with having the meal straight afterwards. So Kiddush precedes all meals. So it's kind of like you're sitting for the meal.
So what would it be? So what we understand is that the purpose of Kiddush, what does Kiddush give us? And we're going to see that a little bit later. If we get time, otherwise we'll do it next week. Is that Kiddush sets up the tone of the meal, and it brings us all together in a collective for that meal. That's why as a general rule, you don't find, besides for Chabad, you don't find that people make their own Kiddush around a table. Chabad have a specific minhag for specific reasons, but as a general rule, the minhag is that the balabait makes Kiddush, and everybody relies on his Kiddush, right? Why is that? Because Kiddush sets the tone. It creates the what we call kfiyut. It creates the establishment of that meal. And we don't eat standing, we eat sitting. And since we eat sitting, therefore Kiddush is yoseh tov leshev. It's better to sit. Okay, that's what the Ramah quotes from the Kolbo. And then he says, so that would be during Kiddush, meaning it's during the brocha itself, because that's the key. He says, he says, some people also have the custom to sit even when you say vayachulu. But rather you stand, and Allah, that's why I was asking what the honor is. You stand up in honor of Hashem's name. Why? Because where do you see Hashem's name? Ki matchilin yom hashishi vayachulu hashamayim. Yom is yud, hashishi hey, vav hey. Okay. I'm not sure if anybody knew that, but when you say Yom HaShishi, what you're really saying is I'm bringing HaKadosh Baruch Hu into my Shabbos table in a very profound way. Okay, because if you remember, Yom HaShishi is from the pasuk before. It's a new thing. So that's why it's called Vayechulu, but we say Yom HaShishi in order to create the space of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name being present even before we start saying the Kiddish, which I think is a very beautiful idea, and it really colors a lot of how our Shabbos should be. Okay, and then he says, when you begin Yitain Einav B'Neirot, you should look at the candles. V'shas Kiddush because Shel Brocha. That when you start Vayechulu, you should look at the candles. And when you say the Kiddish, you should look into the Kos Shel Brocha, into the cup that has Brocha in it. V'chein nireli. And he says he feels that that's the correct thing. Okay. So what we have here is this incredible idea. You look at the candles. Why do you have to look at the candles before you say Kiddish? What's the candles got to do with Kiddish? You know, your wife, if you married, lit the candles, and if you're not married, you're living on your own, you lit the candles. So like, what's the difference between that and Kiddish? So the Gemara tells us that, and I'm sorry I didn't bring the source. The Gemara tells us that during the week, because of the way we walk and the way we live our lives, we lose a certain amount of our sight. I think it means perception. I think it means connection. And on Shabbos, you look at the Shabbos candles. What are the Shabbos candles about? The Shabbos candles are about shalom. They're about peace and harmony. And if we look at the Shabbos candles, then all of that personal, shall we say, focused walking that we have during the week, that stops. And shalom is about connecting with so much more. There's a beautiful Shemi Shmuel. The Shemi Shmuel, the Sokotchover Rebbe says, like really geschmacklos. He says, why do you say to the Malachim, Shalom Aleichem Malachi Asharet? You say, Barchuni leShalom. Give me a bracha of Shalom. Of all the things in the world that you could ask for, why do we ask for Shalom? So you could say because Shalom is the ultimate bracha, and yes, it is. But says the Shemi Shmuel, it's much bigger than that. He says, you know why? Because the only time you're really going to be able to get Shalom in your life is over Shabbos. Why is that? He says, because during the week, you're working. You're busy. You're involved in the Gashmi Dika world. You're involved in the physical world, and since you're so involved in the physical world, your body is pulling one way, but your neshama was pulling the other way because your neshama wants to be involved in the spiritual world, and you will have a constant conflict during the week between the neshama and between the guf and the body, and that's how it works. But on Shabbos, it's different because there's nothing to pursue. That's why Chazal was so brilliant. Chazal says you're not allowed to, remember we spoke about this, you're not allowed to talk things that are not Shabbos-tic, you're allowed to do things not Shabbos-tic, you got all these different things. Why? To avoid that conflict, that inner conflict. And we can avoid that inner conflict that ultimately gives us that shalom. And where does that come from? That comes from that shalom is also connected to the candles. So you see those candles, you see the shalom, you see, okay, now I'm going to make Kiddish. And I'm going to look and that's the ultimate bracha that we have. So now how are you supposed to hold your Kiddush cup? You hold it in your right hand. I'm not sure if I've told you this. I can't remember over the period of we've been together, but one would hold it. There seems to be a custom is you hold it in the palm of your hand. In holding it in the palm of your hand, the idea is that you totally envelop you envelop the kos shel brocha. And if you remember, we've spoken this for sure, that in the hand itself, if you look at your hand, you've got how many digits? There's 14. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 digits, right? 14 digits. And if you look in the Birkat Kohanim has got 15 words. So if you take your 14 digits, holding it, and the 15th word is the kaf, is the palm of your hand, which holds the kos shel brocha, which is shalom. So shalom is a theme that runs through the whole of Kiddush, all the way through, as we've just understood. I think that's a nice idea, a nice word. It's not something just to bear in mind when you make Kiddush. Okay, so now, what happens if so that's in your right hand, because we always do things with our right hands. Small kol adam says that a person who is an iter, a person who is a left-hander, okay, you should still hold it in your right hand. Shehu small kol adam. That's like every person. So he says, yeah, that what does it mean that you should hold it in his right hand, which is the small of all adam, in the left of every man? It means that what the predominant hand is always the right hand. But if I'm a lefty, then I must hold in my left hand, which is my right hand equivalent, so to speak. Okay. The Gra says that that's just a mitzvah lechatchila. That's just a hiddur mitzvah lechatchila. It's just a strict thing. Doesn't make really a difference which hand you hold into. Okay. And I'm not going to go into what the cup looks like right now. What about the wine? Because at the end of the day, that's what we advertised. Let's try and understand the wine. So, what wine could you, must you use? Now, I'm going to look here into the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan quotes the Gemara in Baba Basra. And the Gemara says the following: Ein omrim Kiddush hayoim ela b'yayin shira'ui lenaseich al gabe hamizbeach. That you shouldn't make Kiddush except with wine that you could use to bring as the libation. Now, that's a very important thing. Excuse me, because what does that mean? What wine can you use for libations? On a simple level. On the simple level, the wine that is used for libations is, number one, it's wine. Number two, it's non-mavushal. Okay? So it's wine and it's non-mavushal. If that's the case, so we have to ask ourselves the question, can you say it on grape juice? Are we allowed to make Kiddish on grape juice? Because the Gemara seemed to imply that you can only make Kiddish on wine that is ra'ui, that is appropriate to be used for the libations in the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara says there, the Dvarim Shabbat Evet Kasha B'Nosachim Af Al Pish Lechatchila Ein Laviam Mikol Makom B'Kiddish Gam Lechatchila Kasha. He says, oh no, what it means is that things that B'Di'eved, that after the fact are kosher for the libations, even though you shouldn't use them in Lechatchila, for Kiddish, you can use them lechatchila. So what it means is not on the highest level of strict, but rather on the lowest level. That even the wines that are not normally used, so those are the things that you can use. So for example, Elohein, Yan Megito, what does that mean? Shadain lohu amad karoi. It's not yet completely fermented. It's not yet ready for wine. Lo yavil nasachin. If you bring it for the nasachin, you bring it for the libations, it's kosher. It's not ideal, but you shouldn't. With a Kiddish, afilu lechatchila. And for Kiddish, you can do it lechatchila, no problem. And he quotes the Amar Rav, he quotes an amazing Gemara. Gemara says, Soichet Adam Eshkol Shel Novim, a person can squeeze a bunch of grapes. You can squeeze a bunch of grapes and immediately afterwards say Kiddish on those grapes. And so therefore you can see quite clearly can you use grape juice to make your Kiddish on? Absolutely you can. It's not a problem. It's not a problem at all. Because the Gemara was clear from Rava that you can. There's a lot of stuff here I want to do, just jump over if you don't mind. What about like a flavored wine? So it's not, there's a massive machlokas. Actually, we hold, and we see that elsewhere, that the Ramban holds that you can't use anything except wine, and the Ritva and others. But look what he says here. Katav Rambam. The Rambam writes, this is from the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan is really in the days before the Mishnah Berurah. He was the definitive posek, the definitive halachic decider for the Ashkenazi Jewry. And because the Mishnah Berurah became so popular, it's kind of got lost. But really, as Ashkenazi Jews, it seems to be that he's the one that we should really be at least learning to understand what may be the minhagim that we should follow, even if we don't follow them any longer, because we follow maybe the Mishnah Berurah, because there are places where they disagree. Okay, it says, so he quotes from the Rambam. The Rambam says, you can't use wine except the one that's appropriate for the Mizbeach. Therefore, he says, if any type of honey or any type of flavoring is put into the wine, even the smallest little drop, like the size of a mustard seed, says that's what we can't make Kiddish. And that's what we teach, says the Rambam, in the whole of Ma'arav. What's Ma'arav? The West, meaning where he was in that area of west of Bavel. So that's like what we would call now the Middle East. Okay. V'yesh mi shemati lekadesh alav. He says the Rambam, but there are those who say you can make Kiddush. Says the reason why it said that was because it was trying to give you certain things. Like you can't, for example, by the way, if you have grape juice that is off, you can't make Kiddush on it. You cannot make Kiddush on it. The Rambam quotes Mavushal if it's been boiled. Now we don't hold by that, but he does quote it, which is important for us to bear in mind. But he does quote that Mavushal wine. You don't make Kiddush on that. Anyway, says the Aruch HaShulchan. So we understand the lav klalahu hapsul the mizbeach psul the Kiddush. What was possible for the mizbeach is not possible for Kiddush. It's only stuff that you can't use at all for the mizbeach. So that's if it's smelly or if it's been left open for a night, one shouldn't make Kiddush on such a thing because of what it is. But can you use, I don't know if you've ever seen like those kedem, like flavored wines. Yes, you can use that. There's no problem with using it, at least according to what we're going to see here, because a Rambam katav, the gam mavushal pasul Kiddush. The Rambam says that mavushal wine, everyone knows what mavushal is, it's been cooked up. In our world, it's pasteurized. Pasteurized wine is pasul Kiddush. That's what he says. I'll tell you a funny story. The late Rabbi Mazel, Zichrono Livracha, there was a company in Cape Town that was making wine, and and they were sending that wine to Israel as an export. So on the South African wines, the exact same wine, it said mavushal, but on the Israeli wine, it said not mavushal, because in Israel, if it's pasteurized, I think it's to 86 degrees, then you can decide whether you want to call it mavushal or not. But in South Africa, it's pasteurized at 86, it's considered to be boiled and it's considered to be mavushal. So therefore, they were just doing whatever. That obviously is more expensive. So it was interesting because when we were there at the time when they were exporting it. So it was like 56 Rand for a bottle of wine. It was 56 shekels for the bottle of this non-mavushal, exact same wine. It was quite it was 5 times the price. Anyway, okay, he says the following. The gam mavushal pasul the Kiddush. That he says even mavushal you can't use for Kiddush. The gam b'shem Rashi katfu shemavarchim alav she'akol. Says not only that, but what? That according to Rashi, on mavushal wine you say she'akol. Wow. Aval Rabbeinu Tam, but don't worry so much. Rabbeinu Tam v'riva itzu v'arosh katvu the mavushal. Kiddish. They said, don't worry, it's okay. How much more so you make borei pri hagafin. And so therefore we can see, and the point I was bringing this is just, there's a lot of writing you can see. The point of me bringing this was just so that we understand that this whole idea of what we do drink or what we don't drink is not so simple. Ultimately, if we can just go to there, just to the end where I brought that. Give me 1 second, and then we will go back. Oh no, I didn't bring it up. Okay, so there's a machloikas as to whether you can use grape juice. Some say you shouldn't use grape juice, but Rav Belsky and others, Rav Belsky was the posek of the OU. Rav Belsky says it's not a problem to use Kiddish based on what we've learned because it's just a wine. It's the exact same as just squeezing the grapes directly, so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, let's look at this one last thing before we finish for the evening. Where are you supposed to make Kiddush? Now, this is a very big question. Why is it such a big question? Because in our world, now that things are getting a little bit back to normal, what do? We finish shul, and then we have a little Kiddush. and then we go weiter. Now the question is, should you make Kiddush again when you get home? Right? So says the Shulchan Aruch, Ein Kiddush ela b'makom su'uda. That Kiddush should be made b'makom su'uda, in the place where you're going to eat your meal. And in one house, from one area, one corner to the other, it's all considered to be one makom echad. Kiddush lechol b'panei v'nimlach lechol b'panei acheres afilu tzrakin gadol eno tzarich lachzor b'kadesh. This is because if you make Kiddush in this place and your initial intention was to eat there, but now you decide, like you were going to eat inside, and then you make Kiddush inside. So, it's such a beautiful day. Let's go outside to the covered patio, which we all have in Johannesburg. Okay, then it's okay. You don't have to go back and make Kiddush. But it's clear from this is that if you made Kiddush in a place where you weren't going to eat, then perhaps you need to make Kiddush again. And not only that, says the Ramah, and even from the house to the sukkah is considered to be in the same place, meaning you'd think that maybe because the sukkah is a completely different area, maybe it wouldn't be. But yesh omrim. And there are those who say, there are those who say, if you can see the place where you make Kiddush, the place where you're sitting and eating, you don't have to go back and make Kiddush. Now listen carefully, because what we at this point in time, what we've established is that it would seem to be that when you come home, you have to make Kiddush again, because you didn't make Kiddush in the Makom Su'udah, in the place where you're eating your actual Shabbos Su'udah. If you had made Kiddush in one place, if you had Kiddush in one place, but your mind was because you were going to eat in another place, then that's okay. But now look at this. That only applies. That's only if the two places are in one house. That's if they went from one room to another, or from the first floor to the second floor. And if that's the case, it seems to be that what is coming out is for us to be aware that perhaps the Kiddush that we make at Shul, whilst it allows us to eat, may not be the Kiddush that we need to have as part of our lunch meal, or our Shabbos day first meal. Not only that, comes along the Shulchan Aruch and says, "In Kiddush v'lo sa'ad, af yedei Kiddush lo yatsa." If you make Kiddush and you did not eat, then you have not even fulfilled your mitzvah of Kiddush. Says the Ramah, "V'tzarich lechol b'makom Kiddush la'alter." Says you must eat immediately in the place where you make Kiddush. Or sheyeh b'da'ato lechol sham miyad, or at least you should have in mind to eat immediately there. So if you don't eat immediately, you just mess around, and only then afterwards you eat. So then you may not have even fulfilled your mitzvah of Kiddush. But if you had initially you didn't want to eat, and then you decided you are going to eat, then what? And you decide you're going to eat, then it's okay. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, V'dah, know this. They made a big Kiddush that you have to make Kiddush in the place where you eat. They said, this is the Kiddush. If you drink the full kos, a revit, that 86 mils, completely, nechshav kamakom su'udah, then that place is considered to be your makom su'udah. The im tish'al the im kain heichi mishkachas la shelo b'makom su'udah. He says, if that's the case, where do you ever find that it's not makom su'udah? Because if the guy's making Kiddush and he drinks the whole cup, so then it's makom su'udah. He says, he says, we have to remember, when you make Kiddush, you don't have to drink the whole revi'it. You can just drink a cheekful. And if you only have to drink a cheekful, then maybe you haven't drunk the whole thing, and maybe then you haven't even made Kiddush b'makom su'udah in the place of your meal. And he says there, therefore, he says that what we should, a person should be careful. Says you can drink, you can have a little bit here, and complete your meal in another place. That's only when you've eaten bread or drunk wine. If you drink, only eat fruit, you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah. You need a kazais of bread. And lechem is a type of mazonos. That's our minhag. What's our minhag? That we make kiddush at the brocha, and at the brocha we eat what? Mazonos. Why do we eat mazonos? In order to ensure that we're considering that place a makom seudah, in order we don't have to make kiddush again. There's a ikar kiddush for makom seudah. He says, but you know the truth is, better not to have a brocha. It's a good weight loss thing. It's better not to have a brocha, right? Why? Because we made it like a shmuchel that we're going to make kiddush b'makom seudah using the mazonos at the brocha. But ideally, he says that the ikar is oichel miyad seudah Shabbos. Eat your proper Shabbos meal, and that's the ikar kiddush b'makom seudah. That's the essential kiddush b'makom seudah. And so perhaps from that, what we could say that the ideal thing is that even at the brocha, what we call the brocha, perhaps that's the time to have our first proper meal, to wash. So I always think I should do this, and I always never do. But maybe that's the time to wash, to have something. But if you don't do that, so my minhag that I learned from my rabbein was even if I've made kiddush earlier, is to once again make kiddush b'makom seudah at the lunch table, to remake kiddush, because that really is the ikar, the real ikar of the seudah of Shabbos Kodesh. Let's stop there, and please God, we'll continue next week. There are a few more ideas that I want to discuss with you over Shabbos, and we'll continue that next week. Over Kiddush. We'll continue that week. God bless everybody. Thanks for joining. It's lovely to see everybody.
Thanks, Grape. Thank you.
God bless.